There's a good news and a bad news. The good news is I learned to drive. The bad news is tomorrow is my exam, so I have to study.
All the best, father.
Where are the Divyanand brothers? They're all studying what?
He's studying philosophy for
exam,
driving.
tomorrow I'm studying.
I think the brothers are on retreat.
Okay. Mike.
Huh?
That's because Bosco got keeping away.
Check your phone.
No. I have to study.
Forget all that studying. Check your phone. So many messages are coming.
No.
Check your phone. Check your phone.
Others, have you remind me of
Check your phone. Study.
Sharman Joshi from Three Idiots?
Focus on your studies. No.
I must focus on my studies.
And Bosco reminds me of
So, my dear friends, what is that one thing which helped me focus on my studies? What is that thing that helped me focus on my studies? That made me realize that it is important that I concentrate on my book and not my phone. Come on, who can tell me?
Exams.
Exams, okay. Who else? Ara Farah Akhtar bol yaar kuch. Crystal. Mic is muted. Come on, guess, yeah. Fiona. Okay,
See
I'm getting
the
lot
chat
Fear
box.
of failing.
Willpower, fear of failing. Bosco is really not well or just sleeping. I see that second is true.
Ability to study. Ability.
What it is?
Ability.
Ability. No, not ability. What was that voice which was telling me to study hard and prepare for my exam? Your good angel's voice. Bosco is my good angel.
Your subconscious, otherwise your self-esteem.
Okay, the correct answer, Crystal said, is my conscience. Very good. Okay, at last Bosco can come up
Thank you.
and he can be with us. Okay, so the topic for today's discussion is conscience. Over to Father Leon, who will introduce our speakers.
Okay, imagine if all the people in the world could only listen to their conscience. Will it be a different world? So today, as we reflect on the theme of conscience, the first topic is understanding conscience. And the first speaker for today is Deacon Satish Paul. So many of you already know him. So Satish is a Salesian deacon studying theology in Jerusalem. I have also seen him, I don't know him much, but definitely I've seen his media creativity. Yeah, he's definitely a media person with a lot of digital creativity. Satish, over to you.
Yeah, Father. Yeah. So, people, good evening. Hope I am audible and visible also. One of you can give a wonderful. Yeah. Father, thanks for this opportunity. So, this topic is really amazing, no? Conscience. So, let me begin with a small kind of story. Once a guy was sleeping on his couch. So, outside his room, his dog was barking. So, he was so annoyed and he went and silenced the dog and he came and continued sleeping. Again, after some half an hour, again the dog was barking. He got so upset and he took one stick and thrashed the dog and came and slept again. So again, after 2 hours, the dog was barking so loudly and he was so annoyed and he went and he took his gun and shot the dog. And then he came and slept. So while sleeping, there was a bush behind the bush, there was a thief hiding. So that thief came inside and he killed this man while he was sleeping. So, you know what the dog represents in our story? Yeah, it's our conscience. Yeah, it's our conscience. I came across this funny proverb, no? Like, conscience is the dog that cannot bite but never stops barking. Yeah, this is about now my philosophy professors like Father Matthew, Father Bosco, and all will be wondering why is this fellow giving such a low level example of definition like dog and things and all? So, okay, let's go higher. Okay. So the Catechism, paragraph 1778 says like this: conscience is a judgment of reason whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete act. See, friends, as humans, every action of us has a moral quality. Animals just react. For example, animals don't ask themselves, is it right to eat this smaller animal before attacking? No. So, but we ask like, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? Why I'm not doing this? All these things. Now we have a problem. You may ask me, what about my feelings? Are my feelings conscious? No. Actually, there is a big battle between what I feel in my heart and what my voice of conscience is telling me. For example, Father Leon is inviting 5 of us. Let me see who are the video participants. For example, Marina, Cletus, Michelle, and Shafir. So we all are going for a, Father Leon is inviting us for a tea. Now also we are having a virtual, he's inviting us face-to-face tea, for a party. So there we are invited and we are given a lot of things. There I see some nice tray full of chocolates. So I take one chocolate, and there are, let's say we five of us, and there are only 5 chocolates. I take one chocolate and I eat. The chocolate was so tasty. After eating it, my feelings tell me that I should take one more, and I should take 2 more and keep it so that I can eat it later. Though my feelings tell me like that, my conscience will tell me, no, other people are there, like other friends are there, they also need this. So there I should listen to my voice of conscience, not my feelings. That's why it's a big process. It's a lifelong process to understand the distinguish between my feelings and my conscience. Now, that's why a conscience has to be well informed. So now people would be, now as Christians, we turn to the Bible for inspiration. Now the word of God is, if you open the Bible up and down, you see this theme of conscience running through. I would like to take you all to this account of Prophet Elijah. Who can tell me in which book of the Bible we read about Prophet Elijah? In the New Testament. Very, very good, children. It's in the first book of Kings, chapter 19, verse 10 onwards. You read this. Prophet Elijah stands in this cave of Mount Sinai and for the Lord to pass by. So first there was a mighty wind which shattered the mountains, shattered the rocks. God was not there. Then there was a violent earthquake which created a big impact. God was not there. Then there was a fire which destroyed everything. God was not there. Then there was a gentle whisper and God's presence was there. Elijah came out and he covered his face with a veil and worshipped God. So this gentle whisper, one of my great heroes, Bishop Robert Barron, says in his reflection, like, this gentle whisper is nothing but our conscience. So friends, in our everyday life, we hear a million voices, from the time we wake up in the morning till we hit the sack, we have a million voices. You see this in our social media, from everywhere, we have a million voices coming from everywhere. But do we have this capacity to listen to that tiny little voice that tells us, like, do good and avoid evil? Do we have that capacity to listen to that voice? And also they say, conscience is a very gentle thing. Like I can also compare conscience like a GPS. When you're driving in the highway, the GPS will guide you, turn right, turn left. Suppose you make a mistake, the GPS is not going to tell you, you stupid, or you don't have brains and all. The GPS will again gently tell you, okay, turn right, turn left. That's like, conscience will not press you. So it's a very gentle voice. Now let's come to Jesus. Let's come to the gospel. Now we saw 1 Kings 19. Now let's come to the 19th chapter of Matthew's gospel. So Matthew 19, verse 16 onwards, you read this remarkable account of the rich young man. What does this rich young man come to Jesus and say? Can anybody tell? What does he say?
What must I do to inherit eternal life?
Excellent, Crystal. So Jesus, he comes and asks to Jesus, what must I do? Friends, philosophers and mystics down the ages have discovered this question to be the core of what makes us live as human beings. We continuously ask us, no, what must I do? What should I do? And in this situation, here and now, what should I do? And also there is a constant tension between who we are and what we ought, what we are and what we ought to be. There is one thing like what I am, and another thing is what I ought to be. There is always this tension. Another definition I like about this conscience is from Cardinal John Henry Newman. Cardinal John Henry Newman is a blessed or a saint? Is a blessed or a saint?
Saint.
Yeah, he's recently canonized. So Saint John Henry Newman has this beautiful definition about conscience. He says, conscience is the aboriginal vicar of Christ in the soul. We all know that who's a vicar in the church. This vicar, this word vicar is coming from the Latin, vicarius. That means like an assistant or a proxy or a deputy. If when the boss is absent, the vicar takes charge. So in the Catholic Church, who's the vicar? Pope is the vicar. But Newman says, in the human soul, the conscience is the vicar. So he says, if you listen to your conscience, you would not go wrong. But in order to do that, we have to form our conscience. I think the next speaker is going to speak about how to form the conscience, the education of the conscience, etc. So that's about this Newman's definition. Now let me quote Gaudium et Spes, one of the Second Vatican Council's document. Gaudium et Spes 16 says like this beautifully: deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, but he must obey. For a man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. His conscience is man's most secret core and his sanctuary. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths. Friends, having said all these things about conscience, finally, I would like to conclude like this. One dangerous thing that can happen to us is, because of our fallen human nature, sometimes the sin that comes to us can affect our conscience. Sin, they say sin sometimes numbs our conscience. Sin sometimes desensitizes our conscience. We don't know what is right from wrong. Sin, it's like the third degree burn of the skin. First degree, painful. Second degree, blisters. Third degree, dead black. You put a pin on it and you are not going to feel anything. So sometimes that can happen to us when we allow sin into our life, and our conscience can, for example, our conscience is that gentle inner voice will remind you that this is not right and this is right, and you should not do this and you should do this. That compels us. So that's what I wanted to share, my dear friends. This is about this conscience. And also we need a lot of, conscience is just there. We cannot say conscience is also metaphysical, When I mentioned that word, I remember Father Bosco, who taught me metaphysics. Sorry to use that word, Father Bosco. What I mean by metaphysical, it is not an organ in the body, The brain and the heart are very tangible. But the conscience is a metaphysical concept. It's intangible. It is there. It is that inner principle within us. So, but conscience is inevitable. Everybody has got this conscience. So we have to continually form our conscience, and we have to be very, it's a very delicate. Conscience can be very delicate sometimes. And there are some types of conscience which I don't want to go into. Maybe I'll tell two types of conscience which are two extremes. We should not go into that two extremes. One is called the lax conscience. Lax conscience is, I do a thing over and over and again, and I don't feel that impact. I don't feel the impact of it. For example, I say, what's the big deal? This is no more. For a lax conscience person, nothing is sin. Whereas the other extreme is, can somebody guess? It is scrupulous conscience. For the lax conscious person, nothing is sin. For a scrupulous conscience person, everything is sin. Oh, what should I do and all. Some years ago, I used to be like, I used to be my conscience used to be very scrupulous. No, now, okay. So what we need is a delicate conscience, a correct conscience, a conscience that can tell us what to do at what time. So that's all I want to tell you. This is not a very exhaustive presentation, and I just did what I can. Take it what it's worth for, and thanks, Father Leon. Thanks for listening. Shalom.
Father Satish, thank you very much. Yeah, you have very beautifully explained the concept of what is conscience to us. We also know, as Satish mentioned, forming our conscience, purifying our conscience is very important. So we have now with us Cletus D'Souza, who is going to share with us. It's going to be more of a personal sharing about how to form one's conscience. Cletus, he's a content strategist and a digital media analyst from Thane, and he has also been a catechist for about 6 years. But he uses technology in catechesis. And he's also associated with Don Bosco Youth Services for more than 10 years. And currently he's an animator over there. He's also doing his PGDM in media and advertising. Cletus?
Yes, thank you, Father Leon, for giving this chance. And yeah, so the topic here I have is forming one's own conscience. And when I was reflecting on this and thinking over this, uh, I have certain background in psychology. So the first thing that, and language, of course, literature, because that's what I like and love doing. So I have to see this topic in both the elements. One is from the language point of view, another is from the psychological point of view. So when I see it from the language point of view, I tend to break it into two parts, the con and the science part, because as Satish also rightly put it, there is no particular thing wherein we can say this is how conscious is formed through scientific, through science. So is conscience a way of conning science or deceiving science? Because no neuroscientist or neurologist has till date caught the brain red-handed while forming conscience. So how does it come into the picture? That is one curiosity that I always had. So what is right, what is wrong, who decides? Is it God who decides? Because then who is writing it down? Did the person writing it down make any typing errors, writing errors, whatever? Has it been lost in translation somewhere? What is the guarantee? So that is where then we go more into the psychological form of it. Ki how do we understand the entire concept of this conscience? Each of us has been given something of that sort. What we understand is that uh, it is the voice that speaks to us. In a lot of cultures there are different contexts in which it speaks. For example, if I have to put it in the ancient Egyptian culture, it has been from a long time. There people are urged that you should not transgress from the whatever your heart dictates, and if I have to quote them, they are saying must stand in fear of departing from its guidance. That is how the ancient Egyptians used to treat it. In some belief systems, conscience is regarded as the voice of God and therefore a completely reliable guide of conduct. Among Hindus, it is considered an invisible God who dwells within us. This is also true in a lot of Western cultures. Some places it is mentioned as the inner light of God. So there are different interpretations, and yet we see people who are okay doing wrong, and we feel that doesn't their conscience prick them? Don't they feel anything? Then we go into what we call as a trip to, like earlier we were talking with Father Leo on a trip to Leh Ladakh, we go to a trip to guilt land. And that entire guilt trip takes us down and keeps us loathing as long as we find a way up, either through the help of someone, through by speaking to someone, or by God's grace, if we somehow figure out our way out of it. So then in a situation like this, how does a person form his or her conscience? One thing that I learned, uh, during my catechism when I was a kid there, and this was during my confirmation class. Shefali, who is in this meeting, was one of my teachers there in confirmation, and she used to say that any doubts you have regarding God, anything at all, ask questions. And that wasn't something that we were taught all throughout. It came as a new thing. Ki, ask questions. Are you sure we are allowed to ask questions? Is it not sin questioning God and his ways and things like that? But that is, now looking back in hindsight, I can say that is what has built my faith so strong. Your conscience has to be based on reason. If you're not able to reason it, it is probably a rumor or a myth that is given to you, a story that someone has told, and you're just believing it. As long as someone with a stronger belief or a stronger conviction tells you another story. So, do you have that conviction to question and strengthen your beliefs? Next step here is always pray. Um, Anytime that we participate in the Eucharist or in the sacrament of confession, these are the sacraments of grace. This is where we get the opportunity to be the closest to God, and this is where our conscience develops. It is similar to like learning a language, a new language. We may only know as much as we practice it, we speak it, we learn it. So if you're going to reduce our number of confessions, if you're going to reduce the number of times we visit the Eucharist, building that inner voice or the voice of God becomes difficult for us. So praying plays a very, very major part, because that's where God confers his grace on us. Next is learning. Now we questioned it, we prayed about it. Are we learning it in the practical world? Now, for example, psychology was my second subject. It wasn't the subject that I graduated in, it wasn't the subject I mastered in. That was language. But yet there is something that keeps me intrigued into it. I want to know more. So are you doing that with your conscience? We say killing is wrong, but at the same time we say police encounters for criminals is okay. For justice, we want people hanged. We want people dead, shot, stoned, name it. Conscience conflict. We will know different types, like how just now Sati said about lax conscience, surplus conscience. All of these we'll know when we learn and are willing to educate ourselves. The Catechism of the Catholic Church has a lot of knowledge on this. Are we reading that? Are we trying to understand what is there, or are we going just by the Bible interpretations of what we learned in the Sunday school and what we are hearing in the sermons? That's the only source. Because if that's the only source, then we are, that's, simplified for that particular audience. But if yet it has to be relevant to you, it may not. So that is where the learning comes into the picture. Next thing is, whenever you learn everything, are you waiting and reflecting? I had this one practice that I have been practicing from my childhood. At the end of every day, I rewind all the conversations that I had with people, be it on chat, on phone, on in person, whatever, and I see what happened. What did that person say? What did I say? You can call it anxiety, you can call it overthinking also, but yes, you find threads of something that was a blessing there which you earlier didn't see, something that you might have said might have been misinterpreted or might have hurt someone, and you can then immediately say a sorry to that person, or appreciate that person, or say a thank you, show a gratitude, complete something, find some loophole, understand something better. Whatever it is, unless you reflect on it, there is no way you can improve on it. You can take all the knowledge, but if you're not reflecting and seeing how it can be applied, there's no point. So your house is going to be full someday and you have to throw some things out without using it. So reflection is the third part, and the last part of uh, forming the conscience for me is nurturing friendships. So here, anyone who says that person is a self-made person, I doubt that person has. This is a personal opinion. You can obviously choose to disagree, because in life we need others to help us build us. I have been associated with Don Bosco Youth Services for 10 years, and the last 10 years, so many priests, vocation promoters, brothers, deacons have come in there. Each one has given so much to me. Every person that I meet, be it in my Sunday school, my workplace, my NGO, anywhere I meet, they are giving something to us. Are we nurturing their experiences, nurturing those friendships, and improving our conscience? Because what is the chance that probably, for example, if we take an example of eve teasing, there's no way I can understand, because being a guy, you are not going through that experience. If you have a friendship that tells you, okay, this is wrong or xyz, that is where you understand it. So nurturing friendship will help you form that conscience. There are two challenges in this. One is indifference, and second is coercion, both of which we need to understand that we are bombarded with a lot of media, news, knowledge and stuff like that. So there are chances that we might either be, misguided, or we might not be attentive. So again, it comes back to the 4 pointers that I gave. You need, in that, the third point was reflect. As long as you are reflecting, this indifference and coercion will be taken care of, but it has to be a regular practice. So to conclude, the 4 points that I would I've tried, tested, and I would want to give you all is: one is pray for your conscience. That is where you find your grace, be it in the Eucharist and the sacrament of confession or any other sacrament. Second is keep learning, keep getting practical knowledge of what's happening in the scientific world, social world, political world. Third is reflect on whatever knowledge that you are getting. And fourth is nurture friendships, because more than whatever books or websites or anything that you read, these friendships is what you will learn the most from. So with that, I would like to conclude. Father Leon.